Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome along to Data Platform Down Under. For this month in June, we've got Pavinder Chana joining us from Vancouver, Canada, who's going to take us through calculation groups versus UDFs in Power BI. Now, Martin and I will be watching the chat channel. So if you do have any questions, make sure that you put them in there. This session is being recorded and will be made available on the Data Platform Down Under YouTube channel. If you haven't already joined our YouTube channel, we'll put the link to that in the chat so that you are able to join and get informed about any of the sessions that we have hosted previously and what we're going to host in the future. So with that, I'll hand over to Pavinder to take us through this month's session.
Beautiful. Thank you. All right, I will share my screen once again and get this thing going. Hey, Marty, hey, Warwick, thank you very much for having me. I know it's been probably a month we are planning and all this stuff, and Marty's after me for so many months. Hey, when you couldn't present. So finally we're here. And I'm going to talk one of my favorite area in Power BI, which is calculation groups. And of course, since user-defined functions came, that changed how we used calculation groups in the past. And one of the biggest thing is is UDF going to change or replace calculation groups? So we're going to look into both sides of things on calculation groups and the UDF and see if one is better than another or they can be used together. So again, what we're going to cover about is calculation groups. Again, depending on maybe I will just quickly ask a small question here to the audience. Like if you guys attend using calculation groups as of today, just put yes or no in the chat. I'm looking at the chat right now. And also, do you also using UDFs or started using UDF? Because this is pretty new. Maybe put in a chat yes or no. These are two areas, of course, we're going to look into, and then also we're going to see how they're different, how we can use them. We have a very little slides, and most of the time it's going to be hands-on stuff. So if you can just put it in a chat, that would be great. If you worked, great. If you haven't, that's also good. Kelly is saying he would like to understand UDF better. No yet for both calculation UDF. That's Karen. Great. But I'm keen to know more. Awesome. Beautiful. Good to know. Well, if you can answer there. So again, thanks Warwick for the intro and Marty as well. So again, my name is Purvinder Chana. I'm here in Vancouver, British Columbia. Beautiful. I always say it's beautiful Vancouver. It used to be #1 city in the world. Now I think it's Melbourne or Sydney. I think so. Always competing against some city in Australia. So, I do have my YouTube channel, Power BI How To. I used to be more active on that, but not that many videos I'm doing lately. But a lot of my videos are, if you ever go or interested, it's all on the from my learning from the field, and I try to put it in the video so that people can take advantage of it. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn. That's there. Just a little bit what I want to show off. I'm a Power BI community super user. Data platform MVP, I'm pretty sure there are more MVP here on the call as well. I do run Vancouver Fabric and Power BI user group with the co-organizer is Sandeep Pawar. You guys probably know him, Fabric Guru. And I'm also managing a fabricdataagent.com. I saw Ali, you have like a all things AI. So we have this fabricdataagent.com website where we are bringing the resource from the community and putting in one place. Like if you want to get into Fabric Data Agent, so we kind of putting have this site where bringing all the resources for easy for people to find all things Fabric Data Agent. So Okay, so let's uh, think about what problem we are trying to solve here, right? That's the big thing, like why calculation groups, why UDF, and so forth, so on. If you guys are working with uh, Power BI, as we all are, and anything we want to visualize in Power BI, if we're not slicing and dicing the data, any KPI, any calculations we want to do, we always write a measure for that, right? And all those calculations we write, we might be repeating the codes again and again at multiple places, and we might be writing too many measures, and it becomes a little bit complicated in a way to how to manage, because it's not like solving a problem right now, but like how to manage as well. As your business needs grow, your calculation grows, and your model grow, like how you manage all this stuff. And I found historically before calculation groups, it was like any simple thing has tons of variation of measures we create in Power BI, right? So that's kind of you always I always used to think about like why I have to write the same thing again and again for same calculation but applying on a different measure. For example, I'm having a sales amount and I have a quantity. I might have other KPIs. Then we have a year over year. We all know time intelligence, month over month, all that stuff. Like then we have to do it for every single KPI we have in our model. So that's what where I think calculation groups really solve that problem. So again, I just talked about like if we have a simple, I mean, think about that. Like if you have very simple model, which I will just go over, we have a sales and order quantity, for example, just two basic measure, very simple model. Generally, models are not that simple. And then we have like, time intelligence is the most common thing. Okay, quarter over quarter, week over week, year over year, and so forth, so on. Same period this year versus last year, this quarter versus previous quarter, this quarter versus same quarter last year. So even if we take a one single measure, all of a sudden the variation simply on the time intelligence becomes so many of those. And it's crazy how these things keep on growing. And then there's the other aspect of this as well, um, which we will look into the model. So I'm just going to jump into get out of this thing because I don't want to talk about this much, but let's see these things in practical and then go from there. So here I have a very, very simple model, sales fact table, again, products. We have a calendar, so nothing fancy in here, very common scenario, the simplest you can go, but optimized in a way that of course it's not true star schema as everybody says you have to be star schema. This is snowflake kind of thing because product category is supposed to go straight to sales, geography go straight to sales, but keeping those things aside, it's the simplest model you can think of. The main part of this is we don't have one single date in the sales table. We have order date, and we have a due date, and then we have a ship date. So multiple dates, right? So they're connected to a calendar table or a relationship with the calendar table. Going back to the sales example I said, like, hey, sales, if even if we have a three comparisons for the sales, hey, month to date, previous month to date, quarter date, previous quarter date, year to date, previous year to date, this is already 6 to 7 measure. Now that when we say year to date, month to date, which date we are referring to, right? That's also plays a role. Of course, now we have three dates. We have order date, ship date, and due date. If we have to make like all these combination of measures, time intelligence, and then further take it to the different dates we have in the model, all of a sudden one measure has like around way too many variations. So that's where the calculation groups, if some people said they never used it, and that becomes before user-defined functions came in. Keep in mind, I think UDF, correct me if wrong, if you guys know that it came out right 6 months ago, maybe less than that. They went GA recently, last month, or very recently, so they are very new. Calculation group is there for like 4 or 5 years now, if I'm not wrong. So calculation group before UDF solved so many problems. So we're gonna look into that in action just here for a second. So what I have here is a very simple calculation on a bar chart. We have a sales by year, and sales is like a just simple sum of sales amount, right? And now I'm looking at by year. The first and the foremost question comes in like which year we are looking at right now. Uh, the reason why that question comes in my opinion, because we have three different dates in our model, right? We have a order date, due date, and ship date. So there can be a different dates which falls in a different year. So, or could, if we look into data by month, they might be in a different month. So which date we are looking at right now? So as we all know, when we create a relationship in the model, there can be only one active relationship between two tables. In this particular case, the solar line is telling like date versus order date is the active relationship, and the other two, the dotted lines, are inactive relationship. So if I'm using this explicit measure, which is sum of sales amount, and looking it by any time intelligence function, from my calendar table using that as a my date dimension, it's going to use the activated active relation, so which is based on the order date. So I'm looking at the $4.3 million right now for 2023 based on the order date, not based on the ship date. And 2024 is 6.5 million based on the order date. So now the question comes here, I want to change it to ship date or due date. I want to see it, how does that look like? So what we will do, this is where our measures start. Like we are not even touching time intelligence right now. If I want to see my sales by ship date or by due date, I would create a new measure, which we probably all know what that look like, sales by ship date. So pretty simple DAX. Again, stop me if there is anything you want to ask when I'm writing these DAX measures. So we're going to use relationship function, as probably you guys know. Use relationship in the measure in that specific calculation, the measure we're writing makes your inactive relationship to active, all right? So ship date is right now, and the due date, the relationship we have with the date dimension table is inactive. To make that relationship active, the function is use relationship. So I'm going to use a calendar date, and I want to use ship date from my sales table. So basically, whenever I use this measure, now I am activating ship date relationship and inactivated the another ones in the context of this particular measure only. So there's already a measure that probably I was experimenting. So I'm going to call it V1 for a second. So if now I visualize this measure, which I already created just now, and drop it on the same visual, as you can see in 2023, the buy order date, we have a $4.3 million order, but by based on the ship date by year, it's 4.2 million, right? And if I want it by due date, of course, I already have that in my year, so I will activate the due date relationship and then use that in my visual. So if I drop here, so now we have the same granularity, given that from a calendar table, we are then looking data by sales, the sales amount data by ship date, by order date, by due date. So this is great. As you can see, we already have one, two, three, four measures. Base measure, which is by order date, because that's the active relationship, one by due date, one by ship date. For sales has 3 versions already. And if I have to do it on the order quantity, it means I have to write 2 more measures for the order quantity as well, which will be order quantity by ship date, by due date, right? So already you can say we have a 3 plus 3, 6 measures, and top of that, time intelligence and all the stuff will go crazy. So what's the alternate? How calculation groups help in here, how that can be used. So I'm going to remove again these, just keep the base measure sales date. So calculation groups is a where you define your logic once and you can apply it any of the measure you are using on the visual. So how does that work? Now, Power BI Desktop has now ability to that you can write the calculation groups within Power BI Desktop as well. Previously, it was not available, only tabular editor or third-party external tools you can use. But now if you go on your model tab, a relationship tab, and go to model tab, here you can add calculation groups. I don't use this authoring from within the model, but I'm going to use tabular editor. Again, I'm going to use tabular editor version 2, which is free. But you are, if you are familiar with this particular authoring from here, you can do in the model as well. But I like to do it in the tabular editor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new calculation group, right click on tables and create new calculation group. I'm going to call it selected date. So what is that? It's a name of the calculation group, and it has a name and the calculation items. I will explain what those are. Names is going to be, think about when you create a calculation group. In this particular case, selected date becomes a table in your model. It's just looks like a regular table. Now they have a different icon to represent if it's your regular table or it's a calculation groups table. But it's just a table in your model. Name by default, what it gives, that becomes the column of your table. So I'm going to call it, probably give it the same name, selected date. And then calculation items becomes the rows in your model. So this is where you perform your calculations. The logic you want to apply on your calculation, that's what you will do it in calculation items. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new calculation item and let's call it by order date. So what does that means is whenever I'm using this calculation item in my visuals, any measure will have that logic applied, whatever I write the expression in here. So in this particular example, what I'm trying to do is, hey, I want to see any of the measure in my model. It could be quantity, it could be sales, it could be anything. I want to see it by order date. So as we know, order date is a active relationship between the time intelligence calendar table and our sales table. So in this particular case, I don't want to perform any calculation. So what I want to use is a selected measure. Now, there are few special DAX functions which were originally used mainly for calculation groups. Selected measure is one of those functions. So what does this means is, this tells, hey, when I use this calculation item, whatever measure I'm using on the visual on which I'm using this calculation item, just return that value as it is. So whatever is selected measure, as the name says, just give me that calculation, whatever is in that measure. So we don't want to do anything because by order date, our relationship is already active. We don't need to do anything. So if I want to add another one, I want to say by ship date. So what we want to do here is, as we did it when we wrote a measure, we said, okay, what we're going to do is calculate selected measure. So whatever measure is on the visual, wherever I'm looking at that visual, use that measure and apply this calculation on that. So what I want to do in this particular case, I want to make my ship date relation to be active because I want to see the data by ship date. So same thing, I'm going to calendar date and then sales ship date. Do I have a space in between? Let's make sure. Sales table, ship date, no space. If you don't have an inactive relationship, keep in mind, you cannot use user relationship function. It has to have an inactive relationship to use the user relationship function. So I'm going to say, okay, I want to perform this calculation. Whenever I'm looking data by this calculation item, I want to perform this calculation, which is basically activate this relationship. And similarly, I'm going to add another calculation item, call it by or due date. So the calculation is the same. The only thing I'm going to change is I want to activate the relationship between due date and calendar date. So that's what I want to activate. So once I done my calculation, this is my first calculation group in my model, and I'm going to apply the changes to the model. Again, if you're writing within the Power BI desktop, you don't have to do it. Since I'm writing from Tabular editor, I need to push the changes to the model. So I'm going to go save. So as you get back to your model, it says, hey, there is a new calculation group has been added. So refresh the model. So once we do this, so it's already there. So let's look at the tables. If you haven't seen, so if we go selected date, as you can see, this icon is a little bit different. This tells me this is a calculation group. Originally, when calculation groups came out, their icons were the same as the table icons. It was very hard to tell whether this is a calculation group or it's a regular table. So if we look at a selected date table, as the name of whatever the name we give, they have become a column, and then all calculation items become a row in that table. It automatically add a ordinal. Of course, that's a sort order. If you want by order date to be the third option, you will change the ordinal for that is one will be, let's say, ship date, two will be due date, and third will be the order date. If you want to change the order, how they show up in when we use these calculation items. So how does this made a change what we have done? So we added a calculation group where we just added these calculation items, and in two of the calculation items, we change the relationship. So how it is different and what it is useful to us. So in this particular example, what I have here is showing the data by sales, right? The base amount, the same measure, the base measure. So if I go to selected data and bring the column here, and I have these three options. Of course, these are the three calculation items, and I use this as a slicer. And right now it is showing by order date. And if I want to change it by ship date, I just click on this, and as you can see, the numbers have changed. It went, if I go back to order date, it's 4.3 million by order date, and by ship date, it's 4.2 million. And by due date, it's 4.1 billion. So I wrote a calculation group, and my base measure stays the same because that's the measure I'm using on the visual. And my calculation item, these are the calculation items. I given the instructions in that calculation items or the calculation in that calculation item. Hey, this is the calculation you perform. So if we are telling it when I'm selecting this calculation item, you need to use that relationship. So how did it save the number of calculations? So we avoided writing two measures, sales by ship date and sales by due date, but we added calculation group. So how it benefited to us? The beauty about this is I have it in the sales. Let's say I want to use it on the quantity as well. So I'm looking the data by the bar chart by quantity. So if I remove my sales and I bring the order quantity, I don't need to write measures because this is getting applied into any of the measure get used. So I can use by order date. So what I'm seeing is now order quantity by order date, order quantity by due date, or order quantity by ship date. So my base measures are sum of sales amount or sum of order quantity, but I can apply my common logic on any of the measure which I want to use. Like I might have now 20 measures in my model. I don't have to write the 20 multiplied by 2, another measures on top of that by order date, by ship date. I can use this to visualize the data. And it's not only you can use it for slicer, right? Like for example, I have a order quantity. I can use, it's like any other dimension table in your model. Not truly, but you can use it as, because it's a table and a column. I can put it on a legend and I can see the quantity by due date, by order date, by ship date. I don't have to write multiple calculations. And similarly, I can have a sales in here on my visual, and I can see the data by sales and quantity by any of these different dates. Now, this makes if I have to do this otherwise, like a 3 plus 3, 6 measures, now I have only 2 measures, base measures, and these calculation items. How about, but it also comes with a lot of flexibility as well. For example, if this is the page you want to, okay, now you gave it to your user, hey, whatever way you want to see your data, you can see it by order date, by ship date, by just clicking on this thing. But how about if you want it to be, hey, you pick and choose what you want to see. You want to see sales order amount, or you want to see the quantity. So we can write another measure, which could be, let's add another calculation group, and we call it select a KPI. And what we have here is, I'm going to change the name, just keep it the same as calculation group. So I added a calculation group called select a KPI. I added the name change to select a KPI, which becomes a column. And then I'm going to add 2 calculation items. I want to see sales and I want to see quantity, order quantity, whatever you want to call it. So what happens is, if I'm using, again, we have to tell in calculation item what we want to do. So what I'm saying is, when I use this calculation item from select a KPI calculation group, I want it to return me sales amount. That's my measure. I can write a sum of sales amount here as well, but since I already have that measure written, I'm going to use that. So it's called, let's take a look, sales. It's just sum of total sales amount. So what I'm saying is, hey, any visual, if I'm using this calculation group and this particular calculation item, then give me the sales measure. And in case of quantity, I want order quantity to be returned. So that's what I want it to do. So how does that changes everything in this particular by adding these calculation groups? So I'm going to refresh now, while apply the changes, and it's asking me to make the change. And now we have another calculation group here called select a KPI, and with again column, I call it select a KPI, and then there's 2 calculation item as a rows. So I'm going to use that select a KPI, and so now in this particular scenario, what happens is, I am right now, if you look at this visual, we have a sales on the y-axis. We are seeing everything sales in dollars, as you can see. If I pick quantity here, this visual changes immediately. It changes to the quantity. Now, as you can see, the numbers have gone pretty low. So I can now, if I remove legend selected date from here, so now I can switch between sales and quantity, and also switch between how I want to visualize. So if this gives so much flexibility to us right now, by right, we haven't wrote any new measure. We have the same measure, same everything. We just added two calculation groups, and then we have so much flexibility already. Now you will say, hey, you know what? If I select sales, it's give $1.6 million with the dollar sign. But when I go to quantity, it still gives me the dollar sign. Like I don't, that the quantity is not in dollars, right? Why that is happening, there's two things, and what's the fix for this? These are the things comes a little bit when you're working with calculation groups. I just want to point that out. You have to be really careful how you design your calculation groups. They are very powerful, but you can get into little challenges with those as calculation groups as well. So the reason why it's showing the dollar sign here, because the measure, this measure is a dummy right now. This measure doesn't mean anything. Whatever the, I have the calculation, like if I go into my sale measure and say multiply this by this number, it's not going to do anything until unless I select the sales, right? Then the numbers will go crazy. But when I say quantity, because in calculation item, we put it in here. Hey, when I'm using this calculation item called quantity, you give me order quantity. Order quantity is just sum of quantity. So because we are using sales measure on y-axis right now, visualizing, that's why it's showing the dollar sign, because the sales measure format string is currency. If I use order quantity here, for example, and as you can see, I have selected sales, my dollar sign has gone. Let me remove this calculation, just making the numbers so crazy. So because it is taking the format of what measure I'm using on the visual. So it's using the order quantity measure, format right now. That's a whole number. And when I use the sales measure, because sales is a currency, and it doesn't matter what I select here, it gives me the dollar sign because the measure I'm using on the visual has that format string. So how to fix that? In calculation items, you have the option to write the format string, right? So I'm going to tell here, hey, when I'm selecting the sales amount or using this calculation item, I want to use my currency format or whatever the format I want it to be. So I will give my format here, maybe no decimal places. But when I'm using the quantity, doesn't matter what measure is on the visual, I want it to use this format string. So let's apply these changes. So now, as you can see, I have a sales measure on my y-axis, but no dollar sign showing up right now because I forced it to use the format which I given in the calculation item. When I go into sales, now I see the dollar sign because it doesn't matter what format I have on the visual. Now my calculation item is dictating what format to use. So that's kind of, this makes it really, really powerful. That's kind of a starting point for calculation groups. So, okay, let me see if there are any questions. Agree. Karen, yes, the calculate, you can really change title. We can surely do that. Yes, Greg already answered that. So yeah, that you can create we can create a dynamic because right now what is happening, even I'm selecting quantity and by due date, it's still saying sales by year. I can have this title dynamically created And I can say, hey, selected value from this calculation item, quantity by, and by this, right? So we can easily do that. So that's pretty straightforward. Now, again, going back to tons of measures and how calculation group shines. And as you can see right now, like just 2 measures, and we already made it dynamic enough for end user to pick and choose how they want to see the data. Uh, what happens is if we want to create a month to date and those kind of things with calculation, all the calculations. So I have one here probably already. So for example, again, because of saving the time, what we have right now, if I have to write this month to date calculation. So generally what we do is, hey, this is our measure and this is my dates month to date. So give me month to date data and calendar date or dates quarter to date or YTD. These are the DAX functions, time intelligence functions. I'm not going to go into those ones. So this is my sales month to date. And if I do it for order and order quantity, I have to do the same thing and so forth, so on. Now, if I have to write a calculation group for this, generally what we do, it's a pretty common, anybody who worked with calculation groups have probably seen this as the most common example. So I'm going to call it time intelligence. And let's call the name as in a period. And calculation items can be 3 of those: month to date, QTD, and YTD, for example. So what I want is in month to date as pretty straightforward. So we're going to go selected measure. So basically what does that means is anything on whatever measure I'm using on my visual, apply this calculation, which is from my calendar date. I'm going to get the dates MTD, right? So give me month to date calculation. So that's my first thing. And then I'm going to go for quarter to date, just cut and paste QTD. Simple, these are simple time intelligence formulas. So perfect. So we apply the changes, go back to model, refresh now, and we will have another calculation group here called time intelligence. So MTD, QTD, YTD. So what does that mean is I'm going to quickly change this visual to metrics visual so it's easy to see. So let's keep it here. And then we bring our third one here as well, time intelligence period. Let's put in the slice, or maybe simplest enough. What we can do here is I'm going to put period on my column. So what we have here is we have now a month to date QTD and YTD calculations for without writing any additional measure. We can apply this on any of the measure we are using on the model. This is in the sales right now. I am selected quantity, it's applied on quantity, and I can pick the sales. So now it is applied on the sales, right? So what does that means is until now, we have just base measures, which is sum of order quantity and sum of sales amount with 3 calculation groups. We can see it by any of the date on our sales table. We can select any of the KPI if we wanted to, and we can apply any of the calculation. Similarly, we can have a year to date over year, and so forth, so on. We can have a time intelligence. So written once, and we forgot about it, right? Because then we don't have to write gazillion of measures. Now, until now, this is great. I always work perfectly fine, no issues, except this is where I found UDF came very handy, and we will just look into that. If we look into our focus on just June 2026, Today we are in 8th of June, and my data, as far as I remember, stops is only up to 26th of June. As you can see, 25th of June. So it keep on repeating the same number again, and because there's no transaction for actually, let's go by order date. Yeah, this actually due date they are transaction, but my data stops on 12th of June, and then these numbers keep on same number showing up. As we all know, our calendar table is always in the future. Like usually it's not like up to the today. It's There might be the same calendar. The one way to solve this is that our calendar table stops up to date as of today, or whatever the last transaction date is. But generally that doesn't work. The reason behind that is we might have a multiple facts table in our model. Some might have the like budgeted forecasted data for the future dates. We have a common calendar table used for our forecast, for actuals and all the stuff. So we cannot most of the time in real world have our calendar date only up to today, so that we don't see all these numbers getting repeated again and again. So what's the way to solve for this, and how UDF and all these things come in the picture? Before we go there, let's look at how the UDF works, like how it is different, because the UDF itself, again, when I say UDF, user defined functions, has a similar functionality. If you look at it in theory, you will read that, hey, any common business logic you write in a user-defined function once and then reuse it, right? This is what we did in the calculation group. We said, hey, for example, let's try do something which I haven't tried. It will work probably. Let's write a function. I'm going to use, again, go into the modeling tab, go to the functions and go write a new function. So the first part of this is name of the function. So let's call it fn. That's my naming convention, by ship date. So function by ship date, right? And this is here you will give your parameters. And I'm very happy to tell that previously that you cannot have optional parameters. The recent release, I think this month or maybe 2 weeks ago when it went GA, now you can have optional parameters as well, which is really amazing and a great addition to it, and we will see that as well. So, for example, here what I want to do is I want to pass a value to my function and apply use relationship by ship date on my whatever my year I apply, right? I'm going to call it V as in a value. And then I'm going to say, hey, calculate. And then I'm going to write the same thing. Oh, man. Use relationship calendar date and ship date from sales table. So what I'm saying here in this particular function, hey, whatever value I pass it to this function, have that relationship activate, because this particular function's job is to activate that ship data relationship, right? That's kind of what we want, which we did with calculation groups, because we wrote a calculation item and we said whatever measure we use, and you activate this relationship. So will it work? Let's try. Now, if I need to use this function, I cannot just drag and drop this function, because this function needs a parameter, whatever parameter we pass to it. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to create a new measure. Again, we goes back to the main issue, that creation of gazillion of mayas, right? Even my logic is in one single place in that function, but I still need to write a maya to use that function. So I'm going to say sales by ship date using, let's say, function. So what I'm going to say here is fn by ship date and my sales maya. So what I'm saying here is, hey, I want my sales maya for whenever I use this measure, uh, give me sales by ship date. That's what we're trying to do here. So once I do that, let's see, will it work? I haven't tried it. So I'm going to paste on a new page. So let's go remove all that stuff. I have a sales, and then I'm going to go sales by ship date. This doesn't sound right because previously when we used, the numbers are a little bit different. As this particular sales by ship date, we have the same functionality and same relationship activated, as you can see the number, but this one is showing the same number. As seems like the relationship did not get activated in the function. And that's the reason for that is, when you're passing a value to function, you have to give the type of the value which is coming in. I don't know what terminology actually they use it, but you have to tell whether you're using, if you don't give anything, it is using it as any val, but we want to use it any ref. What does that means is, what is the difference between any val and any ref? This is dynamic, and if I use the val, it will be static. So how does that translate? So let me quickly show here. Did I sales by ship date? This no, the value should change. Yeah, as you can see now, the value matches with the ship date. So again, I just want to this value now using the function, it matches with the sales by ship date. But if I don't give this any reference, it goes back to what the sales value, not by sales by ship date. The reason behind that is, let me create a new measure here. What it is doing is, when it is using any val versus any ref, any val work like this. So it's going to go sales is storing, is, for example, if I do this, so I have my sales stored in a variable, and then I'm activating that relationship. Will it work? No, if you're working with DAX. So once you have a value stored in a variable, you cannot perform any other calculation on top of that. In this particular case, we cannot perform the user relationship because the sales, the value is already stored in a variable. This does not have any impact on that. So when in function, we don't pass it as any, we don't give it as any reference, or this is an expression. It is used as, think about as in a variable. So this particular, whatever calculation I'm applying on this in this particular function does not have any impact. So when I say any ref, so it works. So how does that translate? The one which we just wrote here, this becomes and now it gives us the correct values. So that there are more options. I don't want to go too much deep into that, but you have to be really careful when you're using the UDF that you have to specify, are you gonna, if you're applying these kind of changing, um, applying other filters or calculation on top of that, your measure or whatever the parameter you're passing, then you have to make sure that this has been any reference or there are other type as well, expression and so forth, so on. But you have to be really careful. If you don't give it, it becomes static. So any filter or anything you want to apply on top of that would not work, right? It will give you the same static value because think about it's stored in a variable. So so that's where now the problem with the calculation, can I ignore calculation group completely and use UDF because now I have the logic in there? But again, we go back to the original problem. I can surely keep my calculations. I can surely keep my business logic in functions in one single place, but I cannot avoid writing those gazillion of measures. I still have to write a measure to call that function. So it means if I write a function for a time intelligence month to date, time intelligence YTD, and so forth, so on, it means I have to write those measures. So it means calculation groups allow us to not like a sprawling of these measures everywhere. We can use the combination of these two as well. We can have our business logic. And keep in mind, one thing is important to know here, the calculation groups are within the model, although the measures are not the UDF not part of the model, right? They are just until as now this particular uh, uh, calculation, this particular UDF is part of model because I've given hey, this sales ship date and this calendar date. If I pass these as the parameters as well, then I can cut and paste these measures or time intelligence, my calculations, take into any of the model. But calculation groups stay within the model. That's one of the big distincts between these two. But calculation UDF does not replace calculation groups, even they both have the same logic, like have the centralized logic, but you can't replace because you still have to create measures to use UDFs. Now, how I found it useful, or where I stopped using calculation groups, or where I start using UDF, and where I found the mix of these two turned out to be really good way of getting best out of it. Now I'm going to go back to the original problem I described here. When we were in, the page we were looking at, this one, we have this in June, like we have the data up to 11th of June, and it's month to date is keep on showing the number till end of the month we reach, because it shows all the calculation, all the dates, and then QTD keep on going and YTD go all the way down to the Q4 2026, because my calendar is up to 31st December 2026. So what's the best, like if I have this problem to solve, hey, stop it on today's date. I don't want to see what's in the future. One way of doing that would be, I'm going to go to my month to date. I'm going to say, I think I have it already here. Let me grab that quickly. How are you doing on time, Marty?
We're all good.
We're good? Okay, perfect.
Yep.
I'm gonna get this for a second. We'll get back to this. So if I want to stop it on today, my calculation items, I don't want to go in the future. So I might store something in a table here. I must say a calculate table. So what I'm doing here is, again, just quickly explain. So I'm creating a table. I'm getting all my a calendar date, a table of calendar dates, And then I'm saying store stay up to today. I'm going to call it. So, and data, I'm storing a variable which is up today, and then I'm telling it, give me a calendar table up to today. And then I'm going to apply my dates MTD on that calendar table. Actually, I will come back to it. Let me first see if I did it right. So as you can see, immediately, because today is 8th of June, my data is stopped at 13th. It's a still month to date, but it's not going in the future, right? It's all here right now. It's stopped at today's date and not in future. Again, this is just an example. Now, but I applied this calculation only for my month to date. If I do have to do it for QTD and YTD, it means I need to take this code and and then go to QTD, same cut and paste, return here, and then go to YTD. I will come back to this function, this expression in a second, but let's first see. So as you can see now, everything MTD, QTD, and YTD stopped until June 8th, right? Which is great. Like this, if this is my business need, I don't care about, I don't want to see all the way down till my calendar is up to 31st December 2026. I don't care about the future. Even there's no transaction, it will still show same number repeatedly again and again, right? So what we did here is we said, okay, I want to stop at today, and we created a calendar table and up to today, which is end date. And then we use this from variable and apply the dates YTD. So this part of the logic, if you already noticed, it's repeating at the same three Myers calculation items again and again. This is where I found user-defined functions becomes very, very handy, because this part, which is repeating in, although this logic is going to apply on any of the Meyer I use in my visual. But if tomorrow, let's say, the business need changes and they say, hey, we don't care about today. We are in the second of month or the first week of month. We only want to see the completed months, right? Let's say, which is the last number. So then what I need to do is, hey, I have to come here and tell it, give me end of month of today minus 1. That's where I want. So, but I have to make sure that I'm doing this change everywhere, right? In wherever I have this logic applied. And that's where I found UDF becomes really, really powerful. So I'm going to take this logic and I'm going to say, or actually I already have written, but I will write another one. I'm going to call it a function, call it time intelligence calendar. So don't want to pass any parameter, and the job of this function is to give me a calendar table up to today. That's pretty much it, right? So same logic, I want this and return calendar. So this is my function, doesn't take any parameter. It's like, okay, give me a calendar up to today, and then it's okay. And now what I can do here is, instead of writing this code again and again, I can say, hey, mtd fn, what was the name of that function? use this function to give me the calendar. So my logic to what my calendar table should return is now in that function. So I don't have to worry about writing this again and again, the same logic, and I can use it, in QTD. I'm gonna go here. We don't need this. Go to YTD, cut and paste. Here you go. Apply the changes. So if we see the data, now what we have is a user-defined function, which is helping me to create a calendar, what I want. And calculation group is leveraging that so that I don't have to write all those gazillion measures, but it's using calculation group, user-defined function to control what I want to see. So for example, if the previous example I said, hey, if the business say, hey, we don't want to see today, we want to see until the end of month of last month, completed month. So what I want is my calendar to stop at last month, which is in this particular case is May. So this is my function. This will give me last date of the previous month. That's where my calendar is going to stop. So I make the change at one place, apply the changes. And if we go back here, as you can see, we are only seeing that up to May. We are not seeing in June and so forth, so on. So UDF with a logic in one single place and leveraging it in calculation groups is really found is a right mix that how you can really not. I found it really powerful using this, and it actually enhanced calculation groups a lot. Like I wrote the function before this thing, our session today. I said like, okay, I gave a function a parameter called calendar type, made it even flexible, and the parameter this is great addition that we have a optional parameter. I said if you don't pass the parameter, because previously you have to pass all the values to the parameters, but now we have optional. So I said the way you make it optional, you say equal to whatever this is used as the default value. So what I'm saying here is, hey, if the user, you can have in your calculation pass the how you want to use a calendar by default today. So if you pass the value completed month, then it's going to go 1 month back. If you pass nothing, then it's going to keep on continue as it was before. If you want to stop it at today, we can do that as well. Then I can have a slicer on my page, and with three options. Hey, do you want to see your calculation by today up to last month, and or the completed month, or all times, right? So if I use this function now in my calculation here, which is my another function, rest of, I don't need to pass the parameter by default. It will be today. But if I really want, I can have additional, I can pass the parameter to whatever the period I want to stop it at. So if I apply these changes, so it's the same thing now as it went to today. But let's say if I say month to date, what was the name of the parameter? Completed month. So I want to use this as my value, and this can come from a slicer, right? I don't have to, so that I can leverage it in a way that I don't have to create multiple calculations. So it should, yeah, now it is showing up to completed month. So what does this means is UDF itself is great, but it does not mean to replace, like you don't have to create multiple measures. If you only use UDF, if you have a requirement like creating these all-time intelligence, you will still end up creating those multiple measures all over the place for all your base measures. In this particular example, we took a very, very simple example, time intelligence, 2 base measures, and then just YTD, MTD, QTD already, and then by ship date, by order date. I will put this logic in function as well and call the functions function for switching by activating the relationship. But for MTD, QTD, and YTD, I will still use calculation groups because I don't want to create these many measures to visualize the data. Now I have like a little more flexibility. I can see quantity sales by any period, and whatever the period I also want, if I make this as a slicer by chance, I want to see only MTD, I want to see only QTD, I want to see sales, I want to see by ship date. It's already, I think, with 3 slicers and 3 calculation groups and 1 function, which can be the 4th slicer here as well. Hey, how you want to see MTD, QTD up to today or completed month. I think it becomes pretty dynamic. Let's see what else I have to cover. I think that is pretty much it. I just want to show, and let's see if there are any questions.
That was a great presentation, Parv.
Thank you.
Yeah, nice one. A couple of people added things to the chat. Greg answered a few.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. I've only got one comment. You said at one point in the chat, you said today's June the 8th. Well, actually, for most people watching this, it's June the 9th.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Sorry,
But-
I should have.
But then you said straight after, you're like, our calendar table goes into the future. I'm like, yeah, it does.
Yeah. Oh, it's like a future and present. I don't know. I'm in the present or I'm in the past, or I don't know.
Wow.
I think you are in the
You're
future from my perspective. I'm in the past.
Yeah. Cool.
Awesome. Good. I hope anybody who hasn't used calculation groups or user-defined function before, they probably get some idea how they can leverage this, and yeah, if it can help them to enhance their modeling and less number of measures, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. I think so. What do you reckon, Warwick?
Look, I think it gives a lot more flexibility. So a really good thing for people to be playing with. But as you mentioned in the session, it's also a way that you can also get yourself tangled up.
You know what? One of in my YouTube channel, I think whatever number of videos I have, the biggest volume is calculation groups, and they all talk about all the pitfalls you can get into using calculation groups. Like I have the videos where like, oh my God, I have this thing now, conditional formatting doesn't work. How I solve for that? Or how I do. So in this particular example, it's pretty simple. We talk because I've done a lot of sessions which pretty much focus on calculation groups in itself, just going deep into calculation groups, like what kind of challenges you can get into. It's mind-boggling that it can become complicated pretty quickly if you don't pay attention or understand how does that whole thing work. So if anybody is calculation group and run into any issue, either reach out to me, or probably I already have a video on that topic on my channel. Thanks, Greg. I appreciate your feedback. Much appreciated.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Martin. Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for coming along and being part of the session and the comments in the chat. We will, once this has finished, we will get this up onto the YouTube channel as quickly as we can, so that you will be able to come back and have a look at this in the future if needed. But thank you, Parv, for your time. I hope everybody has enjoyed it as much as we have, and look forward to seeing everybody same time next month, second Tuesday of the month, for our next session.
Thank you very much, Marty.
Nice one, Parv.
Thank you, everyone.
Catch you later. Bye.